on the topic of growth and community growth, I'm interested to know, in your opinion, what the essential elements that separate the successful communities from those that are perhaps struggling a bit, and how these elements are going to be evolving with the changing landscape of community dynamics over time.
So, yeah, I think the core of that question feels like it's the essential elements of distinguishing the successful community from one that struggles. Honestly, I think one of the things that I've had to train myself to really notice when it's happening is when somebody's raising their hand, because a lot of times, especially if it comes from, we'll briefly revisit that, the disparity of interaction rule that basically, and again, these numbers can shift. And it's I've also seen some community pundits who think that these numbers aren't a thing. In my experience, even if it's not the exact percentages, the general idea of 1% of your community being the heaviest, most visible, most vocal respondents to anything, another 9% being, hey, I'm going to throw an emoji on this, or I'm going to ask about this one thing, but I'll probably lurk a lot other than that. And then the vast majority of them just basically hanging back and vetting through the people who are most visible. I believe that generally speaking, that's a thing. So, when we talk about what makes a successful community versus one that struggles, I think just recognizing when you've got somebody who is putting themselves out there and then celebrating that in a way that is congruent with what they're comfortable with is important. So a lot of community management to me comes down to being able to read a room. And it's an inexact science, and it is art as much as it is a science, but it's and I feel like all of these analogies have just been played to death. So apologies to anybody who's already heard all this stuff 1,000 times, but it's I really like the analogy that I've heard before of the cocktail party, where it's you walk in and you don't know anybody, and how warming is your host, or how warming is that so there's that obvious analogy to onboarding, but also just the ability to kind of meet people in stride. And so if I see somebody in my community that has done something that's super helpful, we had a guy in the Sequence community that basically for his birthday created a solution where people could connect to the Sequence API and then do this thing that was currently outside of the way that basically extended what Sequence is able to do. He's a retired software engineer, so he's a heavy nerd, but he basically used the occasion of his birthday to give the community a gift. And so we tried to celebrate that and did it in ways that were public to the community, but we also, sent him a bundle of cookies as thanks. So just being aware and trying to be in tune with the people who are really helpful. And then also being okay with stepping back and remembering that I might be the community dude, but it's not about me. It's about these guys, and trying to be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's all so important. And I guess it varies quite a lot from community to community, because there are so many different types of people and personalities in certain communities. And we like to focus on if my community members are active, I'm doing great, but there's also so much behind the scenes that we can kind of overlook, and just creating that sense of belonging is also so important for a successful community.
Well, the other thing that I'll add, Emma, before I forget, is that there are a lot of different ways for that to happen, and not all of them are public, right? So it's when I was running the e-commerce community, that particular environment, we're looking at the analytics, and we noticed that there were a high percentage of people who were reaching out to each other directly, DMing, which is great. So being flexible, being open to the way that folks in your community are communicating with each other, and then supporting that and helping, essentially water rising for all boats where we can get it.